I'm gonna make a Tarrasque. I got a new studio set up. Let's get crafting. Whew, it's been a while. Let's do it! It certainly has been a while. Hi, I'm Niche from the future. You can tell because I have a mustache now, and a Tarrasque. I found this T-Rex toy in the garbage outside. It was missing an arm and the electronics didn't work anymore, but it was in really good condition and it had a lot of really good detail. I did not have a lot of crafting materials left going into this project, and I couldn't afford to buy more, so I just used whatever I had lying around. This is gonna be a budget tutorial. I started by removing the remaining arm and sawing off the head. This is gonna make it easier to work on. The inside of the mouth was smooth, so to add some quick detail, I filled it with modeling paste and poked at it until it looked kind of like gums. Once that was done, I made a wire armature for the horns. I bulked out the armature with some aluminum foil and then shaped it until I was happy with it. And then rinse and repeat. Then I connected the two horns, bulking out that section, giving him that desirable Chad brow. Instead of using clay or epoxy here, I used watered down modeling paste to add the horn texture. With a little refinement, this looked excellent. It takes a little longer than using clay, but I think the result may be better. Like I said, the details on this toy were pretty good, but the front teeth were fused together to create like one big buck tooth, so I cut those out and replaced them with some teeth that I made out of leftover sprues. I made a bunch of spikes with the Sculpey I had left, and then went to give them a bake in the oven.
Fine.
3 hours later.
His smile was a bit too friendly, so I used some of those spikes to create some more menacing fangs. Eventually. I added some goatee spikes and some extra horn spikes before I started sculpting the face. I had a tiny bit of milliput left, so I used this on the face. As this is the most important detail and required the least material, it was a very economic choice. This step really took it from T-Rex to Tarrasque. Once he was hot and sticky, I shoved my tongue down his throat. Stupid. And with that, the head is complete. Next, I started on the body. I chopped off his back thumbs while narrowly avoiding chopping off my own. The biggest difference between a Tarrasque and a T-Rex are those big beefy arms. So I made an appropriately lanky armature and then bulked it out with some more aluminum foil. Now here's where I had to get a little creative with materials. I had enough Sculpey left to cover half of each arm. I tried to bulk out the other side with modeling paste, but this didn't really work. And so I channeled my inner bill making stuff and I busted out the EVA foam. I started with the hand, gluing a bit of EVA foam to each finger and then cutting it to shape. And to my surprise, it looked pretty good. This gave me the confidence to do the rest of the hand, and then the rest of the arm. The EVA foam created a good base, but it was still lacking detail, so I added some plates to the forearms and the fingers, and then added more spikes. I tried using liquid green stuff to fill in the gaps, but this didn't really work. Liquid green stuff's too expensive for this kind of project anyway, I just really wanted to try it out. I wanted the whole arm to have a scale-like texture without having to cut out a million scales. So I tried to see if I could achieve a passable effect with modeling paste. started by dabbing it with a sponge. This looked terrible. With some experimenting, I found that at the right consistency, you can make a passable scale-like texture with a round tool. This was super quick and good enough for what I needed. I figured at this scale, people are just going to be impressed with how big it is, and the details won't matter as much. You can get away with a lot when you make something really, really big. The process of making the arms kind of made me love EVA foam, and thus the foam adventures continued. I cut out a bunch of progressively larger scales to create that iconic backplating. For some of the plates I had to cut in a little dart to make it conform around the shape of the back. Once those plates were in place, I added more spikes and then textured the whole thing with more modeling paste. I slopped it on at first to fill in the gaps, but then I was very intentional with my brush strokes, trying to make that scale-like texture. So here's where I hit a bit of a wall. I needed to make a bunch more spikes, I had a bunch of huge holes to fill, and my transitions were looking really bad. For this, I turned to nobody's favorite clay, Model Magic. For those who don't know, Model Magic is kind of a soft, rubbery clay. It takes super long to cure, and it doesn't take detail well. But I needed to cover a lot of surface area, and again, people aren't going to look at the fine details when the model is this big. This was a bit of a process. I kept squishing areas I'd already worked on and ruining them, but eventually it was good enough to attach the arms in place. With everything attached, I added more spikes to bring it all together. And finally, I took a wood-burning pen to the whole thing, adding wounds and extra texture anywhere that needed it. This unified the whole thing so it didn't look like a bunch of separate parts. And with that, this primal beast is ready to prime. I did not want to spend a long time painting this thing, so went a little experimental with the paint job. I started with an acrylic tan base coat over the whole thing. Then I went in directly with oil paints. Oil paints are great for covering large areas really quickly, and since my job is oil painting, I have a lot to choose from. There are some drawbacks to using oil paints, like the fact that it's kind of hard to clean. I started with a mix of purple and dark brown for the horns and then a deep red for the body. For the underbelly, I went for a more classic tan color. I thought maybe I'd be able to wipe away some of the oil paint, revealing the tan color underneath. But this was not the case. So I waited for the oil paints to dry to go in with more detail painting and some dry brushing. I was gonna leave this kind of sloppy, but I just couldn't, so I spent the next 2 days painting. It's not a perfect paint job by any means, but it really does look epic. But this monstrosity still can't stand on its own, so I need to make a base. I bought a haul of terrain making materials a few months ago, and this was a great opportunity to try out some of those for the first time. I started with a dollar store square wood piece. Not a perfect material, but it's what I had. I cut it to a more organic looking shape with some wire cutters and an X-Acto. Then to add some elevation, I used cork. This is actually my first time using cork in a project. I feel like it's kind of a rite of passage in the hobby. Then using one of my fun new tools, I poured some plaster into some rock molds. The artist that I bought the haul from actually threw these in for free, so shout out to Christina. I rearranged the cork and rocks until I was happy with the look, and then I covered the whole thing in modeling paste. Then to seal it, I gave the whole thing a coat of black Mod Podge. But mud isn't black, it's brown, so I painted the whole thing brown, and then I dry brushed with different browns until it looked less bad. Finally, I got to use a tool that I've had for months but never gotten to try. A static grass applicator. This really feels as magical as it looks. I cannot believe the difference this makes. I even have multiple tones of static grass. Thanks, Christina. With the base looking fresh, it's time to add in our Muddy Buddy. I glued in the Mini using wooden dowels as supports. Then I added a bunch of brown sludge to fill in the gaps. I wanted it to look like this monster was destroying this pristine landscape with every step. As one final touch, I added a little pigment powder. I'm not sure this did anything. But with that, it's complete, and time for the glamour shots. Thank you so much for watching. I know it's been a while since I uploaded a video. I'm trying to find a better balance between work and making videos. Still working on it. If you liked the video, then give it a like and please consider subscribing. If you want to help me keep making videos, you can join my Patreon. I've got a lot of weird ideas, but let me know what you'd like to see me make next time.